Welcome back everyone to video number 16 in our series. This is hair cutting. It is also in chapter 16 in this textbook. And as I said in the previous video, I was very surprised last week after watching an almost 1 hour video with the teacher from New York reading you questions and answers on the New York test. And she began by holding up the book and saying, I will be referring to this book. One of the first comments was, what book is she using? You've got to pay attention. You've got to read the questions slowly on your exam at least 2 or 3 times. You're not going to run out of time. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've sent thousands of students. You are not going to run out of time. Read the question slowly at least 2 times. Make sure you know what it actually says, not what you think it says. Read all 4 answer choices. Sometimes answer A or B is pretty good, but answer C or D is much better. So read them all. Don't fall into a standard testing trap. Okay? Chapter 16 in this book. Let's take a look at it today. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about specifically guidelines and angles. From the test perspective, I think that degrees and angles is probably the hardest thing. Most people, by the time they get out of school, sort of just intuitively know how to do it. What they don't know is how to answer the questions. And I got to say honestly, when I went to school back in the Stone Age, we used to chisel our notes onto our tablet with a hammer. They never talked about angles and degrees. It was never on the test. Even if it was 10 years ago, it was never on the test. Now it's heavily on the test. So you've got to know them. Okay? We're going to begin with guidelines. There are 2 kinds. There's a stationary guideline and a traveling or a moving guideline. As the word stationary suggests, the guideline doesn't move. You make the first cut and all hair is brought back to that guideline. It's stationary. The typical example of this is the A-line bob. We've all seen them. They get longer towards the front. You begin back here and you bring each section back to that guideline, which means the hair gets progressively longer as it gets to your face. We've all seen them. This is how you do it, the A-line bob. Now, most people know how to do one, but they probably never thought about it exactly in this way. It uses a stationary guideline. It is discussed pretty clearly on page 364 in your textbook. The other kind of guideline is a traveling guideline, also discussed on page 364. It's a movable guideline. You make the first cut, then you move. It moves all around the head. You keep picking up new hair. It's the more typical guideline, probably used on 80 to 90% of all haircuts. Almost exclusively used on men's haircuts. On page 366, it talks about a concept called over direction. And they like to ask a simple question. What does it accomplish and when is it used? What does over direction accomplish on page 366? It accomplishes an increase in the length of layers. And it's generally used in layered or graduated haircuts. Now, moving right along to everyone's least favorite, okay, certainly mine, angles on page 363 and 364. There's 0 degrees, 45, 90, and 180. Now, a few of the typical questions they ask. What is the angle used on almost all men's haircuts? This is a state board test question. And the answer is 90 degrees. They may say, what is the most common angle used in men's haircuts? Still 90 degrees. If it's talking about the degree and men's haircuts, the answer is 90. If it's talking about degrees and women's haircuts, the answer is going to be 45, because the typical question reads like this. What is the most common angle used in most women's haircutting? The answer is 45 degrees. If it's talking about women and angles, 45. Men, angles, 90. If you can get that clear in your head, you're going to get those 2 questions correct. 0 degrees would be essentially an all-one length haircut. Okay? 180, a lot of young women have long hair, like long layers. You're pulling it up, it's getting longer and longer and longer. 180 degrees, a long layered haircut. No matter how they dress up the question, at the end of the day, 180 degrees is a long layered haircut. 45 degrees is women, 90 degrees is men. I know someone out there is going to say, but what about? And I understand that. Nothing is always true, except that nothing is always true. That is always true. On the state board exam, the question is going to say something along the lines of, what is the most common angle used in women's hair cutting? The answer is 45. What is the most common angle used in men's hair cutting? The answer is 90. Now, a couple of heavily tested vocabulary terms, which the general public doesn't know and doesn't care. And sadly, most cosmetology students don't seem to know either on their test. The difference between hair density and hair texture. They're discussed on page 368. Hair density is the number of hairs per square inch on your scalp. Now, obviously, most people have more hair in the back than in the front. So hair density can be different all over your head. Hair density is the number of hairs per square inch on your scalp. Hair texture talks about the actual size, or the fancy test where it's diameter of each piece of hair. Hair density is the number of hairs. Hair texture is the size of each piece of hair. Now, the general public will say things like, well, my hair is very thick, or my hair is thin. When they say that, they're talking about the number of hairs on their head. We know that's actually hair density. It's probably pointless to teach your client about this. They don't care, okay? But you do need to care on your state board test. Hair texture refers to the size of each piece of hair. Hair density refers to the number of hairs. And as an example, before moving on, your book tells you that blondes have the highest hair density of any color of hair. Blonde people have the most hair on their heads in terms of the number of hairs. But generally, my observation of people with blonde hairs is usually very thin and kind of stringy. That goes to the texture, the size of each piece of hair. Blonde hair has the smallest texture. It has the greatest number. So it's very important on your state board exam to understand page 368, hair texture versus hair density, because I guarantee you will see those questions on your test. And that comes right now to the end of our video. Remember, we have this book available for you, depending upon what state you're in. Cosmetology State Board Examination Review. It has every question your state has asked in the last 12 months. It comes with a money-back guarantee. If you buy the book and you study at least 30 days, you don't pass your test, you keep the book, we send you your money. Now, obviously, our pass rate must be very high. It is at almost 99%, because if it was low, we'd be bankrupt by now, refunding money. The pass rate is very high. If you want to study, make sure you study the right thing, pass your test the next time you take it. This is the book you really need. Watch all our videos. Go on to YouTube 2022 Cosmetology Exam Questions and Answers. And please, send us your comments. It's how we know what things you need to learn about. Send us your comments. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and then send us your email, and we will send you a free list of all the vocabulary terms you will need to know for your test. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you on the next video.